Welcome to Section 8 of Module 3, where, as you'll note from our title, we're going to study the determination of defense articles or services on the U.S. munitions list. We've finished up with all of our definitions, and now the idea is to put that new understanding to work specific to the USML. You'll note in our first bullet point that a defense article or defense service is determined exclusively in accordance with the Arms Export Control Act. This is a good example of what we stated previously, whereby regulations and government agencies are supported by specific legislation. That is the case here with the Arms Export Control Act. So the determination of whether a product or service is subject to the USML is a matter found in the Arms Export Control Act. Second bullet point, the articles that are designated for purposes of export and temporary import controls are found in Part 121 of the ITAR on the U.S. munitions list. That USML that we've mentioned so many times now. You'll recall from our previous section that we were looking at Part 120, which provided the purpose of the ITAR as well as definitions. Now we're in 121, which is the specific USML. So let's begin by saying, with the trade tip, that the first step in determining what government entity has authority over an export is to check the USML, the U.S. munitions list. So when we're talking about a distinction between the ITAR and the Export Administration Regulations, we always want to start with the ITAR, the U.S. munitions list. Moving on with this concept of how to determine if a defense article or service is indeed on the U.S. munitions list, let's have a look at this first bullet point and its accompanying sub-bullet points. A specific article or service may be designated a defense article or service if it, sub-bullet point 1, meets the criteria of a defense article or service found on the USML. That's a polite way of saying that if an article or service is on the U.S. munitions list, it's subject to the ITAR and will require a license. Second sub-bullet point, something interesting. An article provides the equivalent performance capabilities of a defense article on the USML. That's to say that regardless of what a product or an article is called, if the capabilities of the article are of an equivalent performance capability of an article named on the USML, that article is also subject to ITAR. And in our third sub-bullet point, future determinations of defense articles or services are based on whether it provides a critical military or intelligence advantage. And of course, the government is going to make that distinction. But if an article or a service provides a critical military advantage or an intelligence gathering advantage, it's very likely that that article or service will be subject to the ITAR because it will be found somewhere in the USML. Sometimes determinations of whether an article is subject to the USML or perhaps another agency like the Bureau of Industry and Security, sometimes that's difficult to make a determination. So the government provides a tool called a commodity jurisdiction, a CJ as it's sometimes referred to. It's a very helpful procedure. As we'll note in our first bullet point, it is a procedure that can be used by a U.S. exporter if there is doubt as to whether an article or service is covered by the USML. Well, what is this commodity jurisdiction? Well, jurisdiction has to do with the government agency that is responsible for an item or an article or a service. That's what we're looking to ascertain here. What government agency covers a given product? In the case of the USML, second bullet point, it requires the e-submission, the electronic submission of a commodity jurisdiction determination form. It's called a DS4076. And as you might have guessed, yes, we will be looking at what the DS4076 looks like in just one moment. But for now, let's say in our third bullet point that the DDTC, through the commodity jurisdiction determination process, will provide a determination of whether an article or service is covered by the USML. So a very helpful tool. Continuing on with the commodity jurisdiction process, a CJ request must identify the article or service and include a history of its design, development, and use. What was it meant to be used for? What are its capabilities? Some of the questions that a CJ will ask. Designations ultimately, the designation of whether a product is on the USML or not, are made on a case-by-case basis, based on a couple of criteria. Number one, as we see in our first sub-bullet point, the form and fit of the article. What is it? What does it do? What is its function? And very importantly, what is the performance capability? Not only what does it do, but to what level of performance capability? Third sub-bullet point, as noted previously, the government, DDTC, is very interested in whether or not an article or service can provide a critical military advantage. So based on these criteria and the ability to fill out a DS4076, the DDTC will come back with a commodity jurisdiction determination. They will tell you whether or not your article is subject to the ITAR or if it belongs under the Export Administration through the Bureau of Industry and Security, which, as we said a number of times, is part of the Department of Commerce. So let's have a look, as an export perspective, at this Commodity Jurisdiction Determination Form. It's called a DS-4076. This is actually a multi-page document, but we want to look at the first 2 pages that really capture the essence of what the DDTC is trying to accomplish with the CJ. So let's have a look at some detail, beginning with the left-hand side of the screen. Well, you'll note in A, applicant information, and right below that, is it a government entity, a manufacturer, exporter, or a manufacturer's representative? So some basic information, name, address, city, etc. But you'll also note the PM-DDTC registrant code. That is if the applicant is already registered with the DDTC. We'll talk about registration in just a moment, but we want to point that out now. If you move down the document and look at number 2, it's a submitter information if other than the applicant in block 1. We'll assume that it's the same applicant, so we can move on from there. In B, about halfway down the page on the left-hand side, now we're starting to get into some specifics here. The transaction description and compliance information. So B3, the transaction description, offers a note: no request involving classified information will be considered. So classified information, which we'll talk about a bit further down the road, is not even considered as part of this type of CJ request. Also, is it a new request or is it a resubmission? Which is to say, had the applicant sent in a submission, a CJ request previously, and had it returned without action, or is the applicant asking for a reconsideration, asking the DDTC to have another look at this CJ request? And if so, right-hand side, what is the prior CJ case number? Moving down to C, let's get into the commodity description. And the applicant has to select what type of commodity type we're talking about. Is it an end item? Is it software? Is it a service, part, system, etc.? And then go into even more detail at the bottom of the page where it talks about commodity service information, product name, a model or version number, part number, manufacturer, service, and even a generic description of the article. So more and more detail as things move along. Looking on the right-hand side of our screen, this is actually page 2. And again, we want to demonstrate exactly what it is the government is looking for. So let's start with number 6, additional commodity information and or documentation, which can include brochures, technical information, drawings, schematics, blueprints, anything that helps the government to arrive at a commodity jurisdiction. Things like cost per unit and additional documentation attached. And also noted, which is very helpful, in 6C, any patent information. That is very important to the government as well. Moving down to number 7, we're looking at a commodity service description, which is a brief summary of commodity or the service, describing the product's use, what it does, how it operates, that form, fit, and function, and what its current uses might be. In 8, even more detail, where the government is asking to identify any special and or unique characteristics, capabilities. This is probably, we don't want to say the most important part of this document, but one of the most important for sure, because it allows the government to make that commodity jurisdiction based on capability, based on form, fit, function. So let's have a look. And they're asking for the applicant to mark any box that applies and provide an explanation or description. Is the article designed to military or intelligence standards or specification? Is it designed for a military application? Any special characteristics, and obviously these are technical characteristics, but they mean something very important to the DDTC. Looking down at 8D, could it be a commercial item that was modified for military application? And if so, provide a nomenclature and model number to differentiate from commercial item. Is the commercial item modified for military application? And if so, state the specific distinct difference between original commercial item and modified item. And of course, a section for services. So 8 is really quite important. Moving down to D, we see things like under product origin, that military or commercial modification of a commodity. Was it originally specifically designed or developed for military use? You have to answer yes or no. Was this commodity originally civil and subsequently adapted, configured, or modified for military use? And continuing down and answering through all the questions. So we want to give people an opportunity that haven't seen a DS-4076 to be able to visualize exactly what it is, the type of things the government is looking for. This is an e-submission, independent of a license application, and any company, any person that has questions about where their product may fall under BIS or DDTC, a commodity jurisdiction will help to clarify that confusion. It's a very good tool to use. Starting to wrap up our conversation on the determination of jurisdiction, there are some other tools that are out there as well. First bullet point. As part of the Export Control Reform Initiative, the DDTC has developed decision tools that help companies to comply with new rules and regulations. Some are found under DDTC. There are others found under BIS. We'll see what those are in just a bit. But for purposes of ITAR, second bullet point, a key tool in determining jurisdiction over articles is the Order of Review Decision Tool. You can see a small version, a small visual portrayal of that tool to the right. We have a full screen look in just a second, but we just wanted to have it on this screen to start to introduce how it works. So really what it is a tool that asks a series of questions that help exporters to determine if an article is subject to the ITAR, determining jurisdiction under ITAR or jurisdiction under EAR. So based on the use of this tool, if an article is not subject to the ITAR, then the user is prompted to go to the BIS Commerce Control List, their Order of Review Decision Tool. Again, we'll see that tool moving forward. Important to note, second bullet point, that this tool is just that. It's a tool. It's an educational aid, and it does not replace the commodity jurisdiction procedure. The website for the Order of Review Decision Tool is provided here, as well as in the bibliography. Here is a blown-up version of the Order of Review Decision Tool. Let's point out a couple of points in the text here. Number one, starting at the very beginning on the left-hand side, the U.S. Department of State, DDTC, offers the following tool to users to help them identify the steps to follow when reviewing the USML. It's an order of review, the process through which determinations are made specific to items that can be found on the USML. Let's read on a little bit further and get into the specifics of what the Order of Review Decision Tool does. This decision tool is based on the new USML Order of Review found in 121.1b1. The USML Order of Review provides guidance for how to classify articles in light of the addition of the revised USML categories being implemented as part of export control reform. Goods are moving from the USML to the CCL. This is a tool that helps to accommodate or help to navigate those new waters. Moving down, in essence, this tool asks a series of questions that will help you to determine the jurisdiction of articles. Is it DDTC? Is it BIS? Fundamental goal there. Important to point out, if through asking us these series of questions, you determine that your article is not subject to the EAR, then you'll be prompted to exit and go to the Department of Commerce, Bureau of Industry and Security, CCL, the Commerce Control List, their Order of Review Decision Tool. We'll see that further down the road as well. An important note to make, this tool is for educational purposes only and is not meant to replace a commodity jurisdiction. So a tool to use specific to ITAR that can assist companies through an order of review procedure that helps to determine jurisdiction. What government agency does my product, my article, my item fall under? So yet another tool that the government is providing. Let's have a look at an industry vertical that helps to illustrate this point around the tools that are available to exporters and manufacturers. You are the VP of Logistics and Compliance for a large aerospace and defense contractor located in Southern California. Since the inception of export control reform and as part of the 600 series and 9X515 initiative, that should be familiar as well, your company has seen many of its articles moved from the USML to the BIS Commerce Control List. Your team has used the DDTC Order of Review Decision Tool, but as part of a new corporate-wide compliance training program, you have to provide other compliance and classification-related tools for people to use. To that end, what other government-provided support is available? Well, let's think about it for a second, but a brief second, because we just went over this a moment ago. Let's see what we have. In addition to the DDTC decision tool, BIS offers its own decision tree tool. BIS falls under the Department of Commerce. They have their own decision tree tool that also helps users to classify goods under the EAR. BIS features a specially designed decision tree tool that assists users in determining if an item is specially designed under the EAR. We'll talk about specially designed moving forward too. This is a quick screenshot. We're not on the EAR yet, the Export Administration Regulations. We have a whole section on that, but we wanted to get it out there and allow people to visualize what some of these other tools are. So important to point out, this is the Bureau of Industry and Security website, and you'll notice in the drop-down box that we captured here, there are references made to decision tree tools. We'll see those tools when we get into the sections specific to the Export Administration Regulations. But as we said a moment ago, we like to provide visual tools so people can see what's out there well in advance of studying a specific subject. So we're going to wrap up Section 8 here. And when we pick up 9, you'll note, we'll talk about registration with the DDTC. We made brief reference to registration in previous slides. Now we'll be going into detail on that. So we'll see you at Section 9.